The year was 2847, and the galaxy had already declared humanity extinct. The Dominion, a collective of 7 ancient species who had ruled the stars for millions of years, had hunted down every human colony with cold precision. They burned Earth first, then Mars. Then the outer settlements fell one by one like dying stars. The great human civilization that had spread across 47 worlds in just 300 years was reduced to ash and memory. But they made one mistake. They believed their victory was complete. They celebrated across their empire, raising monuments to their triumph over the young species that had dared to challenge their supremacy. They wrote songs about the extinction of the hairless apes who had crawled from their blue world and threatened to upset the ancient order of things. They never found the Prometheus. Deep in the void between galaxies, where no sensor could reach and no patrol would ever venture, the last battleship of humanity drifted in absolute darkness. The Prometheus was not like any vessel that had ever encountered. Human engineers had built her in secret, using technology that even the ancient races had never imagined possible. She was quantum-locked, existing in a state between reality and possibility, visible to no scanner and touchable by no weapon. Commander Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked at the faces of her crew. 3,742 souls, the last humans in existence. Children played in the lower decks, born into a war they would never see end. Old men and women who remembered Earth taught them about blue skies and green forests. Scientists worked day and night in labs that hummed with strange energies. Soldiers trained in simulation rooms, preparing for a battle that seemed impossible to win. Sarah had commanded the Prometheus for 12 years now. She had watched her crew grow from desperate survivors into something harder and stronger. Hope had transformed into cold determination. Fear had burned away, leaving only purpose. Every person on this ship knew they were the last chance humanity would ever have. The ship's artificial intelligence, named Atlas, spoke directly into Sarah's mind through the neural link all crew members shared. Atlas informed her that the calculations were finally complete. After 12 years of processing, Atlas had found the weakness in the network. Their entire civilization ran on a single quantum communication grid. If that grid was destroyed, every ship, station, and weapon would lose connection to the others. Their empire would fracture into 7 separate species that had always secretly hated each other. Sarah called a meeting of her senior officers in the war room. Admiral James Wright, the oldest military mind on the ship, listened carefully as Atlas projected the plan. Doctor, the chief scientist, asked technical questions that even Atlas struggled to answer. General Cole, commander of the ground forces, cracked his knuckles and smiled for the first time in years. The plan was simple in concept but almost impossible in execution. The quantum grid was powered by a massive station called the Nexus, hidden at the exact center of their empire. This station was protected by over 10,000 warships and defensive systems that could vaporize a moon. No fleet could ever reach it. No weapon could penetrate its shields. But the Prometheus was not designed to fight. She was designed to do something far more dangerous. The ship's quantum lock technology could be reversed. Instead of existing between states of reality, the Prometheus could be forced into all states simultaneously. She could exist everywhere at once for just one fraction of a second. Doctor explained what this meant. If they pushed the quantum core to maximum overload, the Prometheus would briefly occupy every point in space within a radius of 10,000 kilometers. The ship itself would be torn apart at the atomic level. Every person on board would die instantly. But in that single moment of expansion, the Prometheus would also exist inside the Nexus station. The resulting quantum interference would destroy both vessels completely. The war room fell silent. Everyone understood what Atlas was proposing. The last humans in existence would sacrifice themselves to give the galaxy a chance at freedom. They would never see if their plan worked. They would never know if the empire actually fell. They would simply cease to exist, and hope would be enough. Admiral Wright spoke first. He was 93 years old and remembered holding his granddaughter when the first attacked Earth. She had not survived the bombardment. He said that he had been waiting for this moment since the day humanity fell. He was ready. General Cole agreed without hesitation. His soldiers had trained their entire lives for a battle they could never win through conventional means. This was better. This was a death that meant something. Doctor wiped tears from her eyes but nodded. She had spent her career trying to find a scientific solution to the threat. Now, she understood that some equations could only be balanced with sacrifice. Sarah thanked them all and dismissed the meeting. She needed time alone to think about what she was about to order. The commander walked through the ship she had called home for so long. She visited the gardens where children grew vegetables under artificial sunlight. She listened to an old woman telling stories about ocean waves to a group of teenagers who had never seen water that was not recycled. She watched soldiers laughing over cards in the mess hall, young men and women who would never grow old. That night, Sarah made the announcement to the entire crew. She explained the plan clearly and honestly. She told them what would happen to the ship and to everyone on board. She gave them time to say goodbye to each other, to make peace with their gods, to hold their loved ones one last time. The response surprised even her. There was no panic, no crying, no demands to find another way. The people of the Prometheus had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. They had spent 12 years hiding in the dark, carrying the weight of being humanity's last hope. Now they finally had a chance to set that weight down. The children were hardest to face. Sarah visited every family with young ones and knelt down to look into their eyes. She told them they were going on the most important adventure in human history. She promised them they would be heroes forever. Some of them understood what she really meant. Others simply hugged her and said they were not afraid. The Prometheus began her final journey toward the center of the Empire. Atlas plotted a course that would take 3 months, weaving through enemy territory using the quantum lock to remain invisible. Sarah used this time to record messages. Every crew member was given the chance to speak into the ship's memory banks, telling their stories, sharing their hopes, explaining who they were and what they believed in. These recordings were loaded into thousands of small probes that the Prometheus would launch before her final moment. The probes would scatter across the galaxy, carrying the voice of humanity to any species that might one day find them. Even if they survived, the universe would know that humans had existed. The universe would remember. The day of the attack arrived with strange calm. Sarah dressed in her formal uniform and took her place on the bridge. Every station was manned. Every system was ready. She could see the Nexus station in the distance, a massive structure that pulsed with quantum energy. The fleet surrounding it had no idea that death was already among them. Sarah gave the order to launch the memory probes. 10,000 tiny vessels shot away from the Prometheus, carrying humanity's final message to the stars. Then she gave the order to begin the quantum overload sequence. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship as the core temperature climbed beyond safe levels. Atlas counted down the final seconds. The AI's voice was calm and steady, almost gentle. It thanked the crew for the honor of serving with them. It promised that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Sarah thought about Earth in her final moments. She thought about the apartment she had grown up in, overlooking a city that no longer existed. She thought about her mother's cooking and her father's laugh. She thought about the first time she had seen the stars from orbit and known that she would spend her life among them. The quantum core reached critical mass. The Prometheus existed everywhere at once. For one impossible instant, 3,742 humans were scattered across 10,000 kilometers of space. They were inside the Nexus. They were among the fleet. They were everywhere and nowhere, alive and dead, present and absent. Then they were gone. The explosion that followed was visible across 17 star systems. The Nexus station simply ceased to exist, along with every vessel within range. The quantum communication grid collapsed instantly, sending cascading failures through every connected system in the Empire. Ships lost navigation. Weapons lost targeting. The 7 species of the Dominion found themselves suddenly alone, cut off from each other, vulnerable and afraid. Within a year, the Empire had shattered into civil war. The ancient hatreds between the 7 species erupted without the grid to maintain control. They turned on each other with the same savagery they had once directed at humanity. The other races of the galaxy, long oppressed under rule, rose up in rebellion. Freedom spread like fire across the stars. The memory probes continued their journey through the darkness. One by one, they were found by different species on different worlds. The messages they carried told the story of a young race that had loved and fought and hoped. They spoke of blue oceans and tall mountains, of music and laughter, of dreams that had reached beyond the sky. They explained why the Prometheus had sacrificed herself and asked only that humanity be remembered. Monuments were built on 100 worlds. Songs were sung in 12 languages. The species that had never known humans learned to honor them. The children of former slaves named their own children after the crew of the Prometheus. The galaxy had been saved by a people who no longer existed, and no one would ever forget. Commander Sarah became a legend. Her voice, preserved in the memory probes, was broadcast across civilizations that had never seen a human face. She became a symbol of sacrifice and courage, a reminder that even the smallest species could change the course of history. Statues of her stood in places she could never have imagined, on worlds she would never have reached. The quantum-locked battleship of humanity's resistance did not survive, but in dying, she gave birth to something greater than any empire. She gave the galaxy hope. She proved that the universe was bigger than any tyrant could control. She showed that love was stronger than fear, and that some things were worth dying for. Humanity was gone, but humanity would never be forgotten. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, carrying the light of those who had given everything so that others might be free. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, in the space where the Prometheus had once hidden, particles still danced in patterns that almost seemed like memory, almost seemed like hope, almost seemed like the echo of 3,742 voices, singing together one last time. The universe listened, the universe remembered, and the universe was grateful.